Today I'm using the July 2025 Sheetload of Cards sketch to make 12 succulent cards. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome to the July 2025 Sheetload of Cards from Call Me Crafty Owl. This month it is a kind of, she calls it the companion to the June 2025 edition. So this sketch is similar to the one from June, but in June we made a 5x7 size card. This month the sketch makes an A2 size card, so 4¼ by 5½. And since I used this succulent collection for the June cards of, the bigger versions of these, I kind of had it in my head that I wanted to do it again with the smaller version. Well, technically this one calls for 12 by 12 pattern papers, so you need 2, but I kind of want to finish this collection off because I'm pretty close. And so I think I'm going to see if I can't make it work with 6x6. I have some scraps that might be really good for some of the strip pieces, and then I do have some bigger pieces that I can use for kind of the main focal point. So I'm going to see if I can't make that work and make my 12 cards with the succulent collection. I ended up taking 6 of the 6x6 sheets and first cutting them down into 4¼ by 3" pieces. I got 2 of those, and then with that strip left, I cut 1 by 1¾ pieces, 4 of those, and those will be like those strips kind of on the side of the card behind the big rectangle. And then I took my scraps here and then cut those down into the 1/2" by 3¼ strips going across the sentiment area. And before I get too far, I do want to say that this is a collaboration. There is a playlist linked in the description box below where you can see all of the creative team members and how they use the Sheetload this month, so please be sure to check that out. So in order to make the 6x6 sheets work, I brought in a matting layer on my large rectangle piece. So this is what the cutting guide calls for the pattern paper originally. And so I just sized my pattern paper down 1/4 inch on so that I could make it work with a 6x6 sheet, and then was able to kind of carry on really like normal from there. I like to make my cards in an assembly line process, so I'm starting by putting all of my layered elements together first. I'm starting with these big rectangle pieces, just kind of doing a couple at a time, working my way through the stack. And then once I am done with those, I move on to those smaller rectangle pieces. So this is where the sentiment goes. So I have the white cardstock pieces going on to that kind of teal that I decided to use as my matting layers. As I'm working my way through the rest of my assembly line process here, I just kind of wanted to talk some more about the Sheetload. If you're new to the Sheetloads, each month Alicia from Call Me Crafty Owl puts together a PDF that has a card sketch and a cutting list and supply list, everything you need basically to put together a group of cards. And this month, the number kind of changes. The number of cards you make changes each month depending on the size of the card, the size of the papers that you're using. And so this month it does make 12 cards. And a fun thing to note is on the front of the PDF, the image that she has of the card sketch is full A2 size. So it's a really cool way to kind of gauge if your sentiment's going to work on something or your embellishments will work without actually, even getting into the card making process. But the Sheetloads are a great way to make a batch of cards quickly, and I think they're really fun. I've been doing the Sheetloads forever and am happy to be continuing on the Sheetload creative team and enjoying Crafty Owl's creative process. So here for these strips, I took the strips I cut down originally at the very beginning and just kind of sliced them in half at a diagonal, so I kind of knew what was the middle and what was the outside. and I'm just using my grid mat to line them up on either side of my card base, just kind of making sure that they are going to work behind that rectangle. So since they're not, you don't really need the full strip here, you don't really see it since you have that bigger rectangle going on top of these strips. So it's kind of a great way to use up some of those like smaller pieces. That's one way that made the 6x6 work out for me, is that I could take those little strips that I had and make 2 out of each of those. So be sure to check out that playlist with all the creative team members. I know we have some new ones this quarter, so it's fun to welcome them on the team, and then it's always fun to see everybody's take on the sheet load. We all get the same sketch, and everybody seems to put their own spin on it, so that's always fun to see. As far as the sketch, the only change I made to how it looks is adding that matting layer behind that larger rectangle, and that's just because I was trying to make the 6x6 work. But other than that, I didn't really change where things went, or I added an ephemera piece on the front. You'll see that here in a bit with my sentiment, but I feel like I stayed pretty true to the sheet load, just deviated on the cutting guide and how I got to the sheet load. So finally have all of my card bases put together. I wanted to put my sentiment directly on to that white piece in the rectangle there, and so I used one of my bar magnets kind of as a jig to line it up so I can keep it in place. And then I'm using the Not Too Shabby mini messages stamp set and the sentiments sending and hugs to create like a little sending hugs sentiment, and I fiddle a bit trying to get them lined up and in place, and finally do, and now I can go ahead and ink those up. And again, assembly line, I go through and stamp out all of these at one time, and then I wanted to do this part now because I just wanted to give the ink some time to dry before I started adding these on to the cards. So did all my stamping, and now I'm going to lay out the card bases and kind of match up my rectangle pieces to the strips. I want to make sure that I'm not using the same patterns for both of those. So kind of move things around to see what's going to work better, and I want to do all of these before I start gluing anything down, just to make sure that I'm not going to have a card that has like both patterns matching. So I got all the rectangles glued down, and now I'm going to do the same thing with that smaller rectangle with the sentiment. I want to see which strips work best with the pattern paper behind it, so kind of work through and audition what I want where on all of these, and then we'll get those all glued down. And now the final, I'm laying them all out again. I just keep repeating this process because it works really well. And now I'm going to go through the ephemera pack of the succulents and figure out which ones I want to put on which patterns. I want something that's kind of wide enough to fill that a lot of the white space there. Since my sentiment is kind of tiny, I want to make sure that I get some of that extra white space filled with the ephemera. This is the final step of adding those finishing touches to the cards, and then my 12 cards will be completed. Here are my 12 finished cards, and I did use the scraps that I had left after I cut down like I got the 2 big pieces and then the 4 strips out of each 6x6 sheet of paper, and there was like a little square left that I set off to the side. I was able to cut that in half and use that on the inside of each of these cards, which ended up making it no scraps, because I think I ended up using the strips that I cut down to make these strips here. I had a few scraps that I ended up pulling in as well. So I ended up, everything that I cut down to put on these cards, I ended up using all of it, so there were no scraps left. There were no scraps created from the making of these cards. So they all have, you know, the same sentiment, sending hugs. And this one I did end up pulling in two different ephemera pieces to make it a little wider. It was kind of skinny. So I had fun with these. I'm glad I was able to make the 6x6 papers work for this month's sketch as well. I love this collection from Not Too Shabby, so I've been having fun playing with it, and I am almost done with it. So again, please be sure to check out the description box below to find links for the creative team who has who's showing their videos on how they use this month's sheet load. And I thank you guys so much for your time today and hope you all have a very crafty day.